Morning everyone, it's Terry in Danu's Irish Herb Garden and it's a really lovely wintry day here. We've had a touch of frost overnight, which is quite unusual for us being so close to the sea. But it really just changes the whole atmosphere. It feels like we're actually in winter and we're actually heading towards the solstice. So I'm just going to head out for a walk with the dogs and hope to show you some of the beautiful scenery. Come on then. You ready for a thing? I'm in all my scruff today because I'm going to go back after this walk and paint the bathroom window. But isn't it funny how you have conversations at unusual times of the day? So today we just were wondering about snails because I've recently moved a flower bed and it was lined with stone. And as I pulled the stones away, there were huge gangs of snails stuck to the stones in little groups, like family groups. And I wondered, do snails congregate together as families, or is it just they've all just happened to meet up randomly on this one stone? So I was doing a bit of research and it's fascinating, the life of a snail. For example, they have blue blood. Also, you can tell how old a snail is by the rings on its shell, like on a tree. And in the wild, snails can live between 2 to 7 years. And in captivity, whoever captivates them, I don't know, they can live up to 15 years. So they get quite big then. And we used to put out beer traps for snails, but we didn't think it worked very well because we seem to get more and more snails. I think they like the beer too much. So then we used nematodes to get rid of them. And they are a natural predator of worms. They're little tiny microscopic things that get inside the snails and eat them up from the inside. And that worked like a dream, except that after a couple of years, we were inundated with snails again and slugs. And then I read an article which explained that if you get rid of all your slugs and snails, their natural predators also go because there's no food for them. So then, when the predators were gone, all the slugs and snails came back in huge numbers. And we decided we'd just have to sort it out ourselves. So we began to collect them all in a bucket and we would take them a mile down the road and leave them there. And apparently, because they have a homing instinct of up to 20 metres, if you take them further than that, they're very unlikely to come back. And that worked actually. So now we have a nice balance. We do have slugs and snails, but not in numbers to cause any real damage. And of course, they're part of the natural web of life and they're part of the biodiversity of the garden. And so we were quite happy to coexist with them. There was a French photographer who did some amazingly beautiful photographs of snails some years back, and I remember distinctly one of them. There were two blades of grass and a snail had climbed each one and they'd bent together to form a bridge, and the two snails had met each other and they were giving each other a sniff and a kiss and rubbing against each other, and it was so beautiful. They were like little fairy horses that had just stopped to have this little lovey moment. It was so sweet that you couldn't actually go out and harm them after seeing that photograph. And talking about love, they send out chemical signals when they're ready to mate. And when they meet each other, they have a little petting session where they rub their heads and antennae together and get to know each other. And then they mate. And it could take a couple of hours, up to half a day. I mean, they've got real staying power and they obviously enjoy themselves very much. Even though they're hermaphrodite, they still choose a physical partner, and they both go away and lay their eggs. And they can lay about 100 eggs at a time. And of those 100 eggs, very few actually survive because predators will eat them. They'll be disturbed or harmed in some way. And even if they hatch out, whichever ones hatch out first will eat the other eggs. And then they're very, very vulnerable because they're so tiny and their little shells are so delicate that they're easily crushed and destroyed. The other thing about them is if you throw them away, like that's what I do now, I just throw them into another field, try to aim for 20 meters or more, otherwise we put them into a bucket. But if their shells are accidentally crushed or smashed, they can repair them because they generate calcium in some way, and then they seal it all up inside. And of course their mucus does lots of different jobs, and one of them would be to, I suppose, act as an internal plaster. So they're fascinating little creatures, and I think as long as you have a balance, they don't actually, there's no need for them to give you any worries or do too much harm to your plants. And you know, when you discover more about them, you'd be very, very loath to do anything to actually harm them because they do feel pain. So you know, I just could not harm them now after reading all this about them and finding out so much about them. They also actually have a heart as well, so it's not as if they're just a slimy blob in a shell. They're little beings with a heart. They obviously express affection to one another, and they're just really lovely actually. I'm talking about snails now, I'm not so keen on slugs, but same thing. If you just keep your garden balanced with a lot of biodiversity, so you encourage your birds to come in, you encourage frogs and little mammals so that they will eat these mollusks before they get out of control, well, everything is okay then. And I'm just thinking about them today because it's a frosty day, so they're probably all congregating under some stone somewhere, and they huddle up together, and their mucus turns into a kind of cement because they put a seal all the way around their foot so that no cold gets in. And they're very difficult to peel off a stone or a plant pot. So if you find any, just leave them, just let them be. Count the rings on their shells and you might find out how long they've been in your garden. They don't actually, some of them will stay in a garden all the time, others just visit. So you could maybe put a spot of paint or a spot of correction fluid on them and just see how many times you come across them in the coming year. It'd be a really interesting little project to do with children, and just out of your own curiosity you might enjoy it. So we're here now at the seaside. I'm going to throw a few pebbles into the sea for the dogs and get them freshened up a little bit, and then I'm back to paint the bathroom window. So I hope you're having a lovely day as we are. The blue sky and the sunshine is really, it's just so lovely to see after the misery we've all been through this year. And after a week or two of heavy grey skies, it just lifts the spirits. And so I'm in a really positive mood today, and I hope you are too. If you've enjoyed this little film, please hit subscribe and leave a comment. What do you do about your snails and slugs? Do you have any other pests that you have to deal with? So, bye for now. Have a lovely day. Jazz!